Okay, here we're in Chapter 3 on the Fundamentals of Algebra. This is Section 3.2, Evaluating Algebraic Expressions. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace the variables that's in an expression with a given value, and then we're going to use order of operations basically to simplify those expressions. So again, these are expressions, there's no equality here. And so what we have is the expression x squared minus 2xy plus y squared. And what we want to do is substitute y equals -2 everywhere there's a y, and x equals -8 everywhere there's an x. Okay, so let's write this out. So x squared, so x is a -8 squared minus 2 times x, which is -8, times y, which is -2, plus, and y is -2, then we're going to square it, okay? So what do we have? Well, we have this part which is squared and this part is squared. And so those, because they're exponents, they kind of come first because remember, we're doing PEMDAS. So parentheses or other grouping symbols, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract, okay? So exponents first. So a -8 times a -8. And then we have, well now, before we write this all down here, we have a negative times a negative times a negative. Well, those two negatives make it a positive. And so now we're left with the -2 times 8 times 2. So that gets rid of a little bit here. Then plus, here we have a -2 times a -2. All right, well now we have a negative times a negative, that's positive. And here we also have a negative times a negative is positive. So now we have 8 times 8. Well, that's going to be 64. Here we have, well, this is going to be negative, so we'll go ahead and put that there. Now we have 2 times 8. Well, that's 16. And 16 times 2, if you need to, you can write that out and say, well, 2 times 6 is 12, carry the 1. 2 plus 1 is 3. And so that's 32. And then we've got plus 2 times 2, which is 4. Well, if we think about this, half of 64 is 32. So if we take 64 minus 32, well, guess what? We get 32. Now we have to add 4. So that's going to be a 6, and that's a 3. And so our overall answer then is 36. All right. So now this one, we are given the values up front and our expression is back here. So our expression is a squared minus b squared, okay? Now we plug those in. So a is 3, so we'll have 3 squared minus, now b is a -6 squared. All right, now we have exponents and a subtraction, so exponents come first. So we have a 3 times a 3 minus a -6 times a -6 because we square exactly what's in front of it, and that's a -6. Now we have a negative times a negative, that's a positive, so let's get rid of those. Now we have 3 times 3, well that's 9. Then we still have minus, 6 times 6 is 36, okay? Well, now let's say we have this. This is really taking the larger minus the smaller, and then we take the sign of the larger. The sign of the larger is going to be negative, so now we just have to take 36 minus 9. Well, here we have to borrow, so that's a 2, that's 16. And 9 and 7, 14, 15, 16. Okay, so that works. 2 minus that's 2. And so it looks like we get a -27. All right. And again, all we did was we plugged a equals 3, b equals -6, and we have to remember with that b, we're squaring it, so we have to put the parentheses around that whole -6. So when we square it, it's -6 times -6. All right, what about this one? We have a is 5, b is -8, and our expression is 2 times absolute value of a minus 3 times absolute value of b. Well, 2 minus 3. Okay. Well, now we have grouping symbols. Those absolute values are grouping symbols, and they require us to do something. We have to take the absolute value. So again, if we think about coming up to a stop sign, absolute value of 5. Well, 5 is positive, so we're going to turn right here. and we're going to go 5 blocks. And so the absolute value of 5 is 5. So that gives us 2 times 5. So I've dropped the absolute value and just went ahead and put parentheses. Now minus 3 times, and so now we come up here. Now, well, now we want to go left instead. So we're going to go left, and we're going to go 8 blocks. And so the absolute value of that is 8 because we've done 8 blocks, even though we've gone in the left direction. So the absolute value of that is 8. So now we have 2 times 5 minus 3 times 8. Well, now we just distribute here. 2 times 5, that's 10. And then minus 3 times 8 is going to be minus 24. All right, so now we take the larger, 24, minus the smaller, 10. 4 minus 0 is 4. 2 minus 1 is 1. And we take the sign of the larger, so it's a minus 14. Okay. And so that's what we would do for the one with the absolute values as they are there. Now the next one we have absolute values as well, but it's around the whole thing. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to simplify everything in here after we add in our a and b, get all that done. Once we get that, then we'll take our absolute value. So let's add stuff in. So we'll have 2 times negative 6 minus 3 times, now b is a negative 4, and then ending absolute value. All right. Well, here I have a negative times a negative, so that's a positive. Here we have 2 times negative 6, so that's a negative 12. Here we have plus 12, absolute value. 12 minus 12 is 0, so we have the absolute value of 0. Well, the absolute value of 0 is just 0, okay? So that would be our solution there. So sometimes everything works out nicely, cancels out, and we just get our final answer of 0. All right, what about this one? Well, this one we have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms we have to substitute into our expression here. All right, so with that said, we have to plug in a is negative 7, so we'll have negative 7, the quantity squared, plus b, which is negative 3 squared, divided by c, which is a negative 15, plus d, which is a negative 14. All right, so that gives us all of those things that we have to work on. Okay, so here we square the negative 7. So if we write this out, that's going to give us a negative 7 times a negative 7 plus a negative 3 times a negative 3 all over a negative 15 plus a negative 14. All right, so negative 7 times a negative 7. Well, guess what? A negative times a negative is positive. Here we have a negative times a negative, so that's positive. All right, so now let's go down. 7 times 7, well, that should be 49. 3 times 3, well, that's 9, so we plus 9. All over, well, now we have same signs, negative 15, negative 14, we're adding them together, so we can take 14 plus 15, that's a 9, that's a 2, and our sign is going to be the sign of the 2, which is negative, so that's a negative 29. Okay. Well, now let's do a little more work. 49 plus 9. Well, 49 plus 9. 9 and 9 is 18. Carry 1. 4 and 1 is 5. So we have 58 divided by a negative 29. Well, we know our answer is going to be a negative. Now we just have to do that division. So 29 into 58. Well, if we take 2 times that, that's going to give us 18. That's going to give us 58. So that's going to be a 2 because that gives us 58. And when we subtract that 0, so it's going to be a negative 2. And that would be our solution. So again, we just plugged in those values A, B, C, and D into our expression. We went ahead and did the order of operations. So we had to do the exponents first, get that simplified, multiply, get those two values. Here we have to add, so we get that. And then after that, we can do our division once we have all those simplified, and we get our final answer of -2. Okay, I'll stop here and continue later.